Hello, welcome to Frontiers with Bill. I recently had a comment in the comment section, person asking me to do a video on this saw here. They were having chain brake issues. So I figured I would address their comment. I'll make a video on the chain brake, how to take it apart, put it back together, its operation, and all that on this here saw. So, this is an fb35 VIP electronic. The FB stands for brake. VIP is the anti-vibe, which the solid handled saws all run the same brake. This saw here has the 123 side covers on it, the same as a Partner 330, and Pioneer Partner 330. Now, aside from this safety cover that goes over top of the muffler, and the fact the outer handle, just this here piece and the handle, look different, the internal workings of the chain brake on these and the Frontiers are identical. So we'll start out, we'll remove the side cover with the chain brake. .1024 flat-headed screw in the rear. Quarter 28 bar stud, 7/16. And we'll slide this off. Now we can move this saw out of the way for a moment. So what we have here, we'll zoom you in and get a better shot on the internals of this. So here's what she looks like inside. This chain brake currently is disengaged, and there's not really a whole lot to them. I think what we'll do, I've taken many of these apart over the years, but just for sake of the video, I'll refer to the manual to show how they describe how to disassemble and reassemble this. So this here is the workshop manual to the Pioneer Partner 330, which is identical saw. And we can flip here to the start of the chain brake page. We'll try and zoom you in here. So as it says, the chain brake may be disassembled by removing the two detent screws, here and here, which are this screw here and this screw here. Now I'll move the manual for a second and we'll pull them out. Now, sometimes these can be a little tricky because a lot of times they are Loctited in. That little click you heard was just this rising up and the chain brake disengaging. That screw is removed. Once you remove those, you can remove this plate. And this is what you have underneath. Okay, the next maneuver says, with your thumb over the torsion spring post, release the spring by prying its end with a screwdriver. Take note of the location of the short arm at the torsion spring for reassembly. So what they want you to do now is remove this spring. And here we'll move the manual out of the way, and I'll take that out. So you put your thumb over the post. Right there. Take your screwdriver and go underneath this spring. Come on, focus. And pop it out. And now you can lift this spring out. And what they're talking about is this is the short end. And you make note that it goes down. Right? The longer end goes up. The shorter end goes down and forward. Now our next maneuver, it says remove the brake clip W with a screwdriver. So what they're talking about is on the brake band, right here, there's a little clip that goes around and clips this on. We'll remove the manual here and I'll pop that off. Now they say to use a screwdriver, but I find these little picks work better. So you get underneath here and pull this up. And you don't want them to do that. Here, I'll go grab that. I'll be right back. Okay, and this is what that little clip looks like. And it just maintains the solid end of the brake band on its post. Okay, our next maneuver, it says remove the brake band as shown. It's pretty simple. Which is just pry it up off of both of the posts. So here, once again, I find these little picks work good for this. It just lifts up off of the post. And you lift it out. Alright, the next thing here is the activating lever mechanism may be removed by tapping the pivot pin out with a drift or screw. So what that is down in here there's a pin. And that is this pin right here. So what I usually do is I take the screw that came in it and thread it in a couple turns. Then take a small hammer, hold it up, and give it a couple taps. And that will knock it down a little bit. Then you can remove that screw, and I usually use a straight pick because it fits down inside the threads right to the bottom. And give that a couple more taps. And that will remove it. Now in here you've got this little activating lever, the handle, and the little pin, which has some knurling on it to make it fit tightly in the hole. Now the next piece in the manual says, reassemble in reverse order. It is best to check all parts for wear and replace if necessary. So your things to look at, we'll start with the screws because that's easy. We'll just check and make sure that the threads on the screws are in good shape. And they are. Then we'll check to make sure that this pivot pin doesn't have any wear on it, and that the knurling is in good shape, and that the threads on the inside are in good shape. And this one here is. Next, we'll take a look at the little activation lever that goes down through the housing and make sure that the top here is nice and rounded off, but not too much, and there's no burrs or anything, and no wear on this pin, because that's what your brake band hooks into. Also make sure it's 90 degrees, and that this hole isn't worn, and that this tab that hooks into the handle isn't worn. Because this head tab, also in the handle, fits into this groove. So I guess that'll lead us to this handle. We want to make sure that there's no wear on either end of this handle where it connects and contacts that lever, which is okay, and that this isn't bent extremely in any way that it'll contact or hit anything. A lot of them get bent right in here, which you can just warm them up a bit and straighten them out. Also, we'll look and make sure that there's no wear in this hole, which there is not. Next thing to look at is this spring. We want to make sure that it's not broke, or that there's no wear on the ends of the spring. And there's not. That's just a manufacturing mark there. And the spring's in good shape. And if we look, you can tell that spring isn't sprung, because as you set it down, the spring and both sides almost connect. Then we'll look at this clip and make sure that it's fairly tight together, and it'll hold the brake band in, and that there's no cracks in it or anything like that. These usually don't ever really get any wear on them. Next, we'll look at this little retaining piece and make sure that this tab here isn't worn, because this is what holds your brake on and off. And if this gets worn, or excessively bent, your chain brake won't work. And it also should be flush with the back of the plate. When looking at this too, you want to make sure that this piece right here, which holds the handle in the right spot, isn't bent and doesn't have any excess wear. And this one here is in good shape. And the most common thing to act up, if people have tried to run these with the brake on or something, is the band. Maybe we can give the band a wipe, and we'll look and just make sure that it's not worn anywhere around excessively. And usually you can tell inside if it's been really ran with the brake on, if it's got a lot of bluing in it, which means the metal will be blue where it's been excessively hot. What that can do is take the spring out of it. Like this one has a little mark, but it's not, there's no bluing in it. And it's still good and springy. You can also look at the ends and make sure that they're not worn through or broken. And this one looks in good shape. Actually, I guess one other thing we should look at is make sure the cover is in good shape. Make sure that there's no cracks or breaks anywhere in here. Some of these have an adjustment screw that sticks up at the top, and that just helps maintain tension. So inside, make sure that there isn't excessive wear on this bottom pin, which there quite often is, or this little stop at the back. If these are excessively worn, your brake band can sit in here out of round and make it hard to put this side cover back on, because the band won't want to go over the clutch drum. We can also look and make sure that there's no breaks or cracks or wear around any of these pins where they come through the housing. These ones here have a tendency to break out. I've seen that multiple times. And we'll make sure there's no excessive wear on the outside. And this one looks good. Alright, so the next step, according to the book, says install the torsion spring with the short arm engaging the right hand side of the activating finger. Move long arm with screwdriver to position shown. But it skips in there on how to put the handle and everything all back in. So we'll do that, and I'll show you how. So what I find the best way to do this is take this little activation lever, slide it into place. This little tab goes down through that slot. Then take this lever with this slot here, fits over top of that tab there. And then we just kind of hold that lined up over the hole and start our pin back in. We'll tap it in. Once we get it close to all the way, we'll go to this side try and make sure that it lines up in the hole of this lever here, which sometimes can be finicky. Sometimes you have to get the little pick and move this around. But once you get that lined up so it'll sit down over top of the head, you can take one of the installation screws, they usually hold that clip down, slide it in here while holding pressure out on this handle and tighten this in. So once that's drawn in tight, you can feel the operation of this and make sure it's nice and smooth. And then we'll remove this screw. And if you look down inside there, you'll be able to see that that pin has set down all the way in its hole. And this will move freely. Now, this is where we can continue on with what the manual would say. Now you take your brake band, and line it up over top of this dowel, making sure that it's sitting down in behind this pin, front and rear. And we'll take our little screwdriver and just make sure that this is pushed down all the way. Now we'll hook this end here onto this little pin. And make sure this slides down in nice and true all the way around. We'll push this all the way back. Next, we'll install this little clip. And they can be hard to get on. So what I find works best is I start them somewhat at the bottom and push them in, which will make them look somewhat like they're standing up like that. Then you can take your pick and your small screwdriver and work them into place by going up and down. And they'll pop down in. Then we'll just shove it down flush, so it's all flush down in there, And put a bit of pressure on the back to make sure it's all the way engaged and down. And that's got this little retainer clip installed. Now let's see what the manual says for the next move. So as it says, install the torsion spring, which is this piece, with the short arm engaging the right hand side of the activating finger. Move long arm with screwdriver to position shown. So what they're showing is the spring should go in and be on the right hand side of the lever, activation lever, which means it should be in here. And then that's the short arm. And then the longer arm will flip over and rest against here. So now for this little activation spring. So there's your short end, there's your long end. So it's usually easiest to pop your brake band back off of this lever and make sure it's all the way ahead. Then we'll slide it down on there, making sure that the small end goes down inside here and it's behind this pin. And then this pin here we have to try and pry back and get over top of this tab, which can be difficult. So I usually like to put my thumb on it and hook underneath it with the small screwdriver. Oh, sorry, this is a... Try to get an angle here where you can see. But once you get it hooked on there, then you can make sure you push it all the way down as far as it'll go. And that spring will go down and be lower than this surface and this surface. And look just like so. Then we can just take and hook our brake band back over that lever, push it down into place, and the spring and the brake band are in. There will be spring tension on that spring now. So when you push up on this lever, there'll be spring tension pushing it back towards the front. And you can watch the brake band do its thing. Just make sure it's shoved all down in there. So like I say, this part of the manual says, check assembly prior to installing detent cover. Activating lever should be spring loaded to the front of the cover. Be careful that the torsion spring does not fly out. Wear safety glasses, which is advised. And that's what we just did a minute ago there. Alright, now it doesn't actually tell you how to install the detent cover in the manual. So we'll just kind of go over that. And it can be tricky. So this is the detent cover. It hooks in through this hole and drops down to line up with the screw holes. But like I said, to get that to sit in the right spot can be a wee bit tricky. And you want to make sure that the tip of your lever here that activates your chain brake is sitting in that groove. And push this all the way down, and we can put the screws in. There, one went flying. Like I said, this can be tricky to get these in there. I always find it's easier to tighten the rear one first. And then tighten the front one. Being careful not to cross thread them, because it is easy to do. And sometimes it's best to put a little blue Loctite on these. Now that that's installed, that should be your cover all put back together. We'll zoom you out here and we'll show you the operation. One thing to point out when installing this is make sure that this little tab is sitting up on top of the round here for it to work. So now we'll check the operation. So all the way back, we'll disengage the chain brake, which hopefully you can see the brake band is all the way over touching these two pins. Now with this sitting in the center position, that would be in neutral. So it's still sitting, touching the pins, but this will be up out of the way of your top handle. Actually, it says on here what the positions are. All the way back, you would move it to fill the fuel tank, because that puts it back out of the way of the caps. And the center is cut. That's your position, kind of where it usually likes to live. And then ahead is stop. So when you push it ahead, you'll hear a snap. So what that does is it pushes this little pin out of its home where this tab is holding it back in place. And then your brake band, as you can see, tightens up. You can see it's not sitting tight on these pins anymore. So when you pull it back into place, I'll see if I can do this. It'll be tough. Well, that wasn't so bad. It pushes this little pin back behind here. And that's the operation of the chain brake. Now let's put her back together. This is your bar. Your bar looks like your oiler hole. The tightener rides up in this spot right here. This is opened up a little bit farther at the end to make room for the tightener. Which is right here. And the tension screw is here. So what we'll do to start with is we'll wind this back a few turns just to give her some space. Then we'll slide this bar on. Now we'll put the chain on, making sure the cutters at the top are facing forward. Slides in behind the clutch drum and drops into the top rail of the bar. Then you have to kind of lift it off to the side and back all the way to get the chain over the tip. Then you pull it all the way ahead and it will sit back on over top of the tensioner. Then we'll take the side cover, making sure the brake band is all the way expanded. And we'll put it on. Sometimes they can be finicky to get over top of the clutch drum, especially when they get a little older and that band gets a little wonky. Then we'll put our 1/4 28 nut back on. And we'll spin it on finger tight. We'll put our flat-headed 1024 screw back in the rear, making sure to put your finger in the hole and hold the nut in place. Tighten that up. Next, we'll tension this chain. We do that by turning that tensioner screw. And we'll pull up on the top of the chain and make sure the drive links, when pulled up with a little bit of pressure, come just to the edge of the rail on the bar. Now we can hold up on the chain, which holds the bar up and back. Tighten that nut. Now, with this in the center, you can see your chain moves freely. And with it pulled all the way back to give you more access to the fuel caps. Okay? And it's ahead and back. So even back, the chain will move freely. But when you engage that, your chain is stopped. And to release, just pull it all the way back and then center it in the detent again. and your chain will move freely. And I hope that's enough information on the chain brake and its parts. All at the end of the video here, I'll tag on a couple of pictures of the parts breakdown and the part numbers of all the parts. And thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and y'all have a good day.